Hi, the very first thing to do, once you've laid everything out, is to soften 80 grams of butter, that's about 1/3 of a 250 gram pack, in the mixing bowl. I put the bowl with the butter chopped up smaller nearer to our fire for a few minutes. Don't leave it too long, as it's not good to actually melt the butter like I've done here. Oh well. I like to measure out the flour next. About 400 grams of plain white flour plus 100 grams of wholemeal, though you could use just 500 grams of white for traditional scones. More than 20% wholemeal doesn't seem to work, too dry and crumbly. Then 1 pack of about 50 grams of baking powder. The most important thing to do is to have everything prepared before you start, which was my first discovery when working off a so-called easy internet recipe with pictures. Once you start mixing, your hands are covered with the glue-like mix, and you'll get it on everything: drawer handles, packets and cartons, tools, etc. So keep the cleaning up to a minimum. There's already plenty. Get everything you'll need from start to finish laid out in advance. You should allow about an hour for all the preparation, then 20 minutes for the baking. Next, break the 2 eggs into a measuring jug and add milk to roughly double the quantity. I find this takes the level to just over 200 milliliters. The original easy recipe talks about a little milk. This was too vague for me, and it took a few times to get it right. Add a generous pinch of salt and whisk it together. Next, sieve the flour into the mixing bowl. This both mixes the flours and baking powder, and I've heard it adds air to the mix, though I'm not sure that's true or even necessary. Now that the bowl from the scales is empty, you can measure about 150 grams of sugar, or as I do, sugar and raisins, half and half. Before you start any mixing, sprinkle flour onto the surface where you will roll out the dough and cut out the scones. So now we're about ready to get dirty. Start mixing. The dry part really isn't too bad, but once you add the milk, you really don't want to have to touch anything else until you've finished. How to mix is very difficult to describe, even with pictures. It is sort of like your fingers are the blades of a mixing machine with some kind of complex random orbital programming. Effectively, you're pinching the butter into the flour. You want to do this until you can't feel any lumps of butter. Some people add the sugar and raisins right at the start, saying it makes it easier. But I think you then can't really feel whether the butter is fully mixed. Good idea to switch the oven on about now and let it warm up. When you are satisfied that the butter is fairly evenly distributed amongst the flour, then it's time to add the eggs, milk, salt mixture. Add almost all of it, but hold a tablespoon or so back for later. I continue to mix in the same style as before until I feel the milk and eggs mixture is fairly evenly absorbed by the flour-butter mixture. Then I start to gently squeeze everything together into one ball. Hopefully the video shows how to do this, as it's very difficult to describe in words. It is so sticky, but the trick to get most of it off your fingers is to kind of wash your hands in a little flour. Ah, you see? Yes, that's a use for that flour you sprinkled on the surface next to the bowl. It works. It's amazing. Once you have the ball of dough, place it on the flour you sprinkled on the table and press it flattish, using flour if it's a bit sticky. We use the rolling pin, dusted with a little flour as well, to roll a slab about 1 centimetre thick. I use a glass of about 5 centimetre diameter, doesn't really matter, to cut out the scones. Dust the edge with flour occasionally, otherwise it will stick to the dough. I cut around the edge of the slab first, as the middle is invariably thicker. When I've gone round the edge, I roll it into a ball again and roll out another slab. This way, the slabs will gradually get smaller and smaller until you've used up all the dough. When you've used all the dough, paint the tops of the scones to be with the drop of eggs and milk mixture you held back, and then sprinkle a little brown demerara sugar on top. Well, that's what I do. You don't have to do that, but I think it works. By now, the oven should have reached temperature. 20 minutes, no more, at 200 degrees should be more than enough. Scones don't seem right if they're overcooked. And curiously, I find that this is just enough time to get all the washing up done. I don't quite know why I cover the scones fresh out of the oven with a tea towel, but it seems like a good thing. They need to cool down before you put them in a tin or they'll go soggy. They are a bit crumbly when still warm, but delicious. Really, they're best the morning after.